Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to explore a quiet land deal that seems simple at first, but slowly reveals a hidden scheme that changes everything. What happens when trust is placed in the wrong hands and a single signature quietly reshapes an entire life? If you find this story intriguing, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming videos. In the gentle afternoon light spilling across endless golden rice fields, a lone shadow stretched toward a small thatched house with cracked clay walls. The village was quiet, almost too quiet, until a calm but oddly deliberate voice cut through the air. "I have a rice field I'm thinking of selling. Are you interested in buying?" The elderly woman inside slowly looked up. Her hair was white with age, her back slightly bent, but her eyes still held a cautious sharpness earned through years of hardship. Her voice trembled, yet she tried to keep it steady. "Yes, I was thinking about selling too. How much are you asking?" They walked side by side along a narrow dirt path, dry leaves crunching underfoot, like secrets whispered by the earth. The land revealed itself ahead, half an acre resting beside a clear stream. Sunlight danced on the water's surface, shimmering like scattered silver. The woman gestured toward it, a faint pride surfacing despite her fatigue. "This land is good," she said. "Close to the stream, sandy soil, easy to work. You can grow anything here, cucumbers, vegetables, whatever you want." The stranger nodded slowly, his eyes scanning every ridge and furrow. He listened, but his mind was already far from the image of simple farming. Between them hung an invisible tension. On one side, an old woman hoping to sell her last piece of land to survive. On the other, a man measuring value with cold precision. As the sun dipped lower and twilight crept in, they stood quietly by the stream bank. Water flowed steadily, mirroring the uncertain rhythm in both their hearts. The old woman sighed, unaware that this small decision was opening a door to something far deeper and far darker than she imagined. Night fell. Inside the house, an oil lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the woman's weathered face. The stranger sat across from her, his tone softened, carefully practiced. "It's only half an acre. I'm selling it for 15 million. What do you think?" She hesitated, then slowly nodded. Her hands shook as she accepted a thick stack of bills, 5 million as a deposit. "I don't have all the money with me right now," he added smoothly. "I'll leave this first. The day after tomorrow, I'll come back with the rest and we'll do the paperwork." The room felt heavier with every passing second. The ticking clock seemed louder than before, counting down fragile moments of trust. She gripped the money tightly, her gaze drifting toward the dark yard outside. The land that had fed her family for generations, now slipping quietly away. The stranger stood up and bowed slightly. "Take care of yourself. I'll see you the day after tomorrow." When the door closed and his footsteps disappeared into the night, the woman remained seated. The money in her hands felt warm, yet sharp, like a promise that could also become a blade. Outside, the wind swept through the fields, carrying with it a chill of change she couldn't explain. She whispered to herself, hoping everything would turn out fine, even as doubt stirred deep in her chest. Under a pale moon, the stranger stood alone on the newly acquired land, a bucket at his side. He gathered dry grass and debris into a pile, muttering to himself, "I'll turn this place into a vegetable garden. No more relying on locals." Soil like this is worth every bit of 15 million. He struck a match. Flames crackled, climbing hungrily into the night. Smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of damp earth and ambition. He pulled out his phone and spoke in a low, confident voice. "Boss, everything's going exactly as planned. The contract's basically settled. I'm finishing up the rest now." A calm, satisfied reply came through the speaker. The man smirked, nudging a barking dog nearby with his foot. "Hey, you bastard, don't bite me." Then he laughed quietly and muttered to the empty air, "I'm Diep's friend." The fire flared brighter, lighting up his face, a face weighed down by secrets. In that moment, he was no longer just a land buyer. He was a small piece in a much larger game, every move serving someone far away. The wind swept through, ashes spiraling upward like restless spirits. He stared toward the horizon, toward Diep's quiet home, hidden in darkness, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and unease he couldn't quite explain. Morning arrived softly. Sunlight spilled across a small garden behind a modest house. Banana trees swayed gently, heavy with fruit. Rows of green vegetables rustled in the breeze. Diep moved among them with practiced hands, her skin rough from years of labor. A soft smile spread across her face as neighbors' voices carried over the fence. "Diep is so talented. Look at all these vegetables. Your daughter's grown so fast." She glanced up, eyes warm, watching Nee play nearby. This was her world, simple, tiring, but full. Every row of soil held her sweat. Every banana carried a quiet joy. Birds sang overhead, blending with Nee's laughter, creating a peaceful scene untouched by the schemes unfolding elsewhere. Diep wiped her brow and hummed softly, her fingers brushing the broad banana leaves as if protecting her entire life with that single gesture. She didn't know it yet, but unseen shadows were already moving closer. The garden remained bright, but a faint, invisible mist had begun to settle over it. As the sun climbed higher, Diep's phone rang. She answered while pulling weeds, her father's familiar voice warming her heart. "Hey, Dad's back from the business trip." She smiled immediately. "Yes, Dad, I'm listening. You're home already? I'll tell Mom to cook dinner and wait for you." The call was short, but it lifted her spirits. When it ended, she glanced at the clock and exhaled. "This afternoon, I need to pay the rest for the land and pick up Nye." There was always something to do. The garden, her child, the daily struggle to keep going. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the red dirt path, her pace steady even as time pressed down on her. She looked up at the drifting white clouds, telling herself that everything passed eventually. Family and this small piece of land, that was her strength. She had no idea that a storm was quietly gathering, far beyond her view. The cool, air-conditioned office felt worlds away from muddy fields and garden soil. The man stood straight before his boss, speaking with controlled confidence as numbers and plans rolled easily off his tongue. "We're still short about $3 billion for the wood import," he reported. "I suggest we start small. 20 tons first, then 30. We test everything carefully before scaling up." The boss leaned back slightly, fingers tapping the desk in thought. His voice was calm, measured. "I'll transfer additional funds. Make sure everything is airtight. Machinery, workers, logistics, no mistakes." Tension hung thick in the room, but beneath it pulsed ambition. They moved on to employee plans, raising salaries, organizing a 3-day beach trip costing $20 million, partially subsidized for workers' families. Every figure discussed wasn't just money, it was control, loyalty, momentum. "Well done," the boss said at last, a rare smile crossing his face. "Next month, the new shipment arrives. I'll inspect it myself." The man nodded, a mix of pride and pressure tightening his chest. Outside the glass window, the city rushed by. Cars, people, noise, but inside this room, only power and profit mattered. Compared to Diep's quiet life among vegetables and banana trees, this was a cold, calculated world where people were pieces on a board. None of them realized an invisible thread already connected their lives, stretching tighter with every move. Late afternoon settled in as the bell chimed at the door of Diep's modest beauty salon. The sound was gentle, almost polite. A man stepped inside, Mr. Huan. He was well-dressed, posture relaxed, eyes sharp beneath a pleasant expression. "I was passing by and saw the salon," he said lightly. "Thought I'd take a look." Before Diep could respond, Ni ran forward, her voice bright and carefree. "Uncle, when will you take me to the ball pit again?" Mr. Huan chuckled and patted her head. "Soon, I promise." Diep emerged from the back, hands still damp with soap. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a guarded smile. "Please, come in. Have some water." He waved it off politely. "No, thank you. I'm in a bit of a hurry. Maybe next time." He turned to leave just as quickly as he'd arrived. The moment he stepped outside, the air inside the salon felt heavier. Diep stood still, fingers tightening around the towel in her hands. Something about the timing unsettled her, though she couldn't explain why. Nai tugged at her sleeve, asking for a banana. Diep peeled one for her, smiling, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Through the glass door, twilight stretched Mr. Huan's shadow long across the narrow street. Diep watched until it disappeared, her heart beating faster than it should have. A vague sense of warning crept in, soft but persistent. The life she treasured felt as though it had reached a quiet edge, and something from the past was slowly finding its way back. That evening, the elderly woman sat alone in her dim house, the oil lamp flickering weakly. She counted the deposit money again and again, as if afraid it might vanish. Outside, frogs croaked by the stream and the wind whispered through the fields. Sleep came late, heavy with unease. At dawn, Diep prepared to leave. She dressed simply, packed the remaining money carefully, and took Nai by the hand. The path ahead felt longer than usual. Every step stirred dust. Every sound seemed sharper. Still, she told herself it was just another day. Work, responsibility, routine. Meanwhile, the stranger returned to the land early, surveying it as if it already belonged to him completely. The burned patch was black and bare, smoke still faintly clinging to the air. He made a call, voice low. "She'll be here today. Everything's on schedule." On the other end, a brief pause, then a reply filled with certainty. "Good. Don't rush. Make sure it's clean." He hung up and looked around, eyes cold. The stream flowed calmly beside him, unaware of the plans forming on its banks. By midday, Diep arrived at the small office where the paperwork was supposed to be handled. She waited, Ni sitting quietly beside her. Minutes passed, then more. Her phone buzzed. No signal. She checked the time again, anxiety tightening in her chest. When the stranger finally appeared, his smile was easy, reassuring. "Sorry, there was a delay," he said casually. "Let's finish this." The documents were placed on the table. Diep scanned them, her reading slow but careful. Everything looked official enough. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid the money across. Outside, clouds gathered, dulling the sunlight. As the final signature was made, something shifted. Subtle, irreversible. Diep felt it, like a quiet snap inside her chest. The stranger stood, folding the papers neatly. "Thank you," he said. "This land will be put to good use." She nodded, forcing a smile. Nee clutched her hand tightly, sensing the change without understanding it. That night, rain fell hard over the village. Water rushed through the stream, muddy and fast. Diep lay awake, listening to the storm, images replaying in her mind. The garden, the land, Mr. Hoan's shadow, the stranger's smile. Every piece felt disconnected, yet bound by something she couldn't see. In the city, the boss reviewed reports under bright lights. Numbers looked promising. Expansion was close. He lifted his phone and sent a short message. "Proceed." Far away, flames lit the field once more as machinery arrived under cover of darkness. Trees were marked, soil measured, boundaries redrawn. The land was changing, fast and without ceremony. Morning came again. Diep stepped into her garden, breathing in the familiar scent of leaves and earth. For a moment, everything looked the same. Then she noticed the silence. No distant chatter, no laughter from neighbors, just the wind. She looked toward the horizon, where unfamiliar structures were beginning to rise. A quiet fear settled in her chest. The thread connecting their worlds had finally pulled tight, and somewhere, unseen, it was beginning to tear.